Kia ora tātou. I came through last year, and just to give a little bit of kōrero about astronomy and Māori astronomy, and focused a little bit on matariki, and that's kind of growing out into what's on the walls, and I want to mihi to the tauira. I had a walk around before, and your work is beautiful. It's truly beautiful. And I've loved the way that you've captured some of the essence of the kōrero, which I'm just going to touch on briefly tonight, and just lay a few whakaaro with you before I leave. I don't want to be too long. I heard a quote, very famous quote from Winston Churchill, who said once that a good speech is like a skirt. Should be long enough to cover the subject, but short enough to arouse interest. So hopefully I aroused quite a lot of interest by having a very short skirt. Number one. Number two, I just wanted to let you know that my version isn't the only version. It's very important. My version isn't the only version. My version's the only correct version. My version is not the only version. This has come from, I spoke to the students last time, a 400-page manuscript on astronomy that started in the year 1898 out of Ruatahuna, where I'm from, and has been combined with 20 years of research from across the country. So I'm just going to lay out a few things. Shouldn't take me more than half an hour. This is Te Tūtutu Kaurewa, or the pantheon of Māori gods. I'm not too sure if some of the students are aware of a person by the name of Te Haunui Tuna. Yeah, he's the person that's on our project as the illustrator for our books and our artwork. And these are just a few of his sketches that he's been doing. So in the beginning, Rangi and Papa were stuck together in this embrace. And you all know the story how Tāne separated them. And the god that rebelled against his brothers for separating his parents was Tāwhiri. Tāwhiri is a god who is a atua riri huneinei. This word huneinei is usually a kind of anger that's associated to a female. An angry man is known as he riri ahira rauwhe. So when a male gets angry, we burn like a fern fire. Get angry, hit someone, the fire goes out. We're mates again. But a wahine, he riri huneinei, tō te wahine, is a kind of anger that she holds on to for 50 years and then hands down a few generations. And then her mokopuna say, I don't like that kuia because my kuia didn't like that kuia. Aroha mai wahine mā. Inari, there's a difference between the male element and the female element. But Tāwhiri was the first riri huneinei. It's a vexatious. He was just so really peeved with his brothers that he decided to war upon them. And he came across Tāne and he belted Tāne, he belted Rongo, Haumea, Tangaroa, and then he came to our God, the God of war and mankind. This is who we get all our traits from, too. The angry one, the jealous one, the one who wars. This is where we get this from. And he fought two, and two thrashed him. And in his pain and out of his love for his father, he tore his eyes out, crushed them in his hands, and threw them to the sky, and they stuck to his father's chest. These are the first stars. These are nā mata o te ariki Tāwhiri mātea, or matariki, matariki, as I think is more correctly known along the East Coast, and is probably a little bit closer to the actual name that's been shortened over the years. So this is how the constellation gets its name. Thank goodness for us. Two then decided, well, because of the weakness of my brothers, I'm going to go beat them up. So he beat up Tāne, and Rongo, and Tangaroa. And this is the reason why we go to the ocean to fish up the fish, and the fish don't come to the land to fish up the people. Because our atua dominated their atua. And Tu said to Tangaroa, haere ake nei, ko o uri hei kai ma oku uri. Your descendants will be food for my descendants. It's the reason that 7-foot chickens don't come and eat us, because our atua beat tāne and said, haere ake nei, ko o uri hei kai ma oku uri. Hence, here we are. 2 other siblings of tāne and the other two Tukaurewa were Tango and Wainui. Tango was the male. I had an uncle Tango. Tango means black. It was very appropriate. And his wife Wainui, who was personified in the waters. And they had their children, the te rā, te marama, ngā whetū, hinatore. Hinatore is like a glow stick. It's a phosphorus light. This is the correct phase or term in traditional Māori kōrero to have an epiphany. We use sayings like, kua taka te kapa, or kua mura nā raiti. So the lights have come on, or the pennies dropped. Those aren't traditional Māori sayings. Kua hinatore is. It means that you have had an epiphany, or your brain should look like that when something makes sense. Pari Koikoi was the 5th child, and the last, as pictured in this beautiful painting over here, was Hine Rauamoa, a very lean and petite, beautiful star. She was a very dexterous woman, very athletic. Tuhoe, very lean, shaped more like that as opposed to that. Just saying. With Hine Rauamoa, Tāne married Hine Rauamoa, and they had Hine te iwa. This is where weaving comes from. The form comes from the male. The actual fine work comes from the female. I'll explain this a little bit more. And together, they are personified in the weaving that happens as part of Māori artistic excellence. So, when the world was separated, Rangi and Papa were separated, there was no light. Okay, that's very much later on. There was no ka puta te whai au, it was dark. And what Tango had done is he created the first ever house on the world. Its name was called Hui te Rangiora. And inside that house, he placed the objects o te whānau marama, the family of light. So when you walk into a wharenui, straight above the door, he hung the sun. Halfway down the house, where the Pautoko Manawa is, he hung the moon. On the walls of the house, he hung the stars in patterns. This is the origin of tukutuku. He hung them in different shapes and patterns. And then at the back of the house, he put Hinatore, Parikoikoi, and Hine Rauamoa. Tāne came to him and said, bro, it's dark. Give me your children so we can have light. Tango was quite happy to give his children away. Wainui was a little bit more reluctant, but the father said, take them, so he did. And Tāne created the first baskets ever. Wahine mā, the form of weaving originates from a male, not from a female, and it was Tāne, who after he had separated his parents, there were still vines that tied them together, and he got his very famous ads, Te Awhi o Rangi, and he cut them all away, and he left them in a pile, and then he went back to the pile and said, I'll weave 3 baskets. And the first one was Raururangi. In that basket, he put the sun. The second was Te Kauhanga, and he put the moon. The final one was Te Kete Nui, o Te Mangoroa, o Te Kupenga Nui, the Milky Way, and he put all the other objects. Found his relation Tamarereti, and on their canoe, he sped out across the ocean to a place called Paiwai o Te Rangi. That's where the sky meets the ocean. And then they started to climb into the heavens. Threw the anchor overboard. Then Tāne thought to himself, well, Hine Rauamoa, Parikoikoi, Hinatore, I put them in the sky, it's still dark, I'm going to put the stars. But his thoughts returned to Hui te Rangiora, how the stars were arranged in the tukutuku panels, and he thought, I'm going to put them up in patterns. I'm going to put an emoji over there. I'm going to put Tāne was here over, the bat signal over there. So he started to arrange the first stars. And those are the big stars we can see in patterns. The pot, put up by his hand. Rehua and Scorpius, put up by his hand. That's why they're in shapes and patterns. After he put up the first 20 or so, he was pretty chuffed. Tāne, while he was in the sky, and he thought, ooh, I need to do a haka. I feel so, this is going to be brilliant. And he put his basket at his feet and he started to haka, thrusting his arms out, sticking his tongue out, performing this mighty haka, kicked his leg out, kicked the basket over. The basket spilt across the sky, and that's how we get the stars. That's why some of them are in patterns and the rest are scattered. And Tāne is also doesn't just mean the god, it means male. And as a typical male, he didn't clean up. And he left this massive mess across the sky, and he said, there. Had it been a female, would have vacuumed, dusted, trillion years later would have started again. So when you look into the sky, and I'm not too sure if you can see this image very well, but this is the black part of the Milky Way. This is over the top of Mount Ruapehu. When you see the black part of the sky or the Milky Way, you're actually looking back inside an up-tip basket with the stars spilling out on both sides. This, I opened with a karakia tonight, and I watched Derek smile when I was saying that karakia, because he knows this karakia, and there's a line that says, Ringi hia I te kete ko te ika nui o te rangi, and spilling out of the great basket like a fish with the stars. Ka ngaro ki runga rā, and they were lost into the cosmos. And that's that there. So that's how the stars get in the sky, e hoa mā. I just want to touch on matariki. I've been kind of, it's good to come over to Te Tai Rāwhiti and get away from all the chaos that I've seemed to have caused regarding matariki in the last 2 months. I'm sincere when I say my version is not the only version. I'm sincere when I say that there are tribal and regional differences when it comes to everything. However, I think we need to be very, very cautious in identifying what is traditionally Māori and what has been a colonised, imposed idea about what matariki is. And in particular, who we are listening to, who is telling our stories. And I want to touch on this because rather than tell you what matariki is, I really want to talk about what matariki is not. And perhaps put some things out there. Hei wānangatanga, for you to determine for yourself. Hei kai mātō hiningaro. My job is just to share my research and what I've collected. And you take away from it what you will. There is probably the most accepted idea that there are 7 stars in matariki. And there are 7 stars in matariki. My research is telling me there are 7 and some additional ones. I want to show you this quote. I found that the Māori could see more stars in the Pleiades with the unaided eye than I could, for while I could see clearly 6 stars, they could see 7 and sometimes 8. There are references saying that Māori from Colenso in the far north in 1839, that they could see various satellites cross the face of Jupiter. So he's talking about the moons. That is, to be able to have that power, and I don't think we truly realize just how magnificent our ancestors were. When you stare into space, night after night after night, your eyes are like a muscle. And you use them, they get better and better and better. They stared out across the ocean, they stared out across the plains, they looked into space. We don't do that anymore. The sky we look at is beside our television. We read our phones and we watch our television. If they could see more than 7 stars, would they have named more than 7? I just leave that out there for you to think about. The Greeks had 9. The Hawaiians have 9. Rapa Nui have 9. Aitutaki have 9. Why we got 7? Pātai no heo tēnei ki a koutou. 7 sisters. Okay, unless there's been some major operations since the last rising of Matariki, they are not all female. This is a Greek story. This comes from Greece. They are the children or the daughters of Atlas and Pelion. And they were stuck in the sky to escape Zeus. This is a Greek myth. So is the idea that I've heard lately, oh, they're a flock of tui or a flock of keruru. Pleiades means a flock of doves. That is a Greek story. And even though you might think this is the Kapahaka group from Ruatahuna, okay, it's actually Leonidas and the Spartans. We look very similar. This perpetuation of 7, of sisters, of doves, those are all introduced stories. This is probably the most common. Matariki means little eyes or tiny eyes. Okay. The person who translated this was a man by the name of Elson Best. He translated this. He said, oh, mata means eyes, and I think riki must be ririki as in little, so they're tiny eyes. Okay. Nowhere before the year 1992 can I find a reference in any place of a Māori saying they mean tiny eyes or little eyes. Okay, in Hawaii they mean the eyes of the god. In the Marquesas they're the eyes of the god or the eyes of the chief. On the Cook Islands they're the eyes of the god or the eyes of the chief. Only in Aotearoa do we have little eyes or tiny eyes. Okay? And this is something that we are telling our children, they're tiny eyes. Māori always have a story regarding the origins of a name. Okay? We don't go outside and say, that mountain is Bob. And the river is Shirley. Okay? We have a story, a reason why we name something what we name it. Nā mata o te ari ki Tāwhiri Mātea talks about how Tāwhiri removed his eyes and threw them to the sky because of the pain he felt from the separation of his parents. This is the origins of the reason why Māori cut their hair off or mutilate themselves when someone close to them dies. It originates from Tāwhiri Mātea. I'm not too sure if you've seen this tikanga, where someone cuts their hair off when someone dies. Our tipuna used to lacerate their skin. They used to lacerate themselves and let blood flow as a sign of grief. They would beat themselves and bruise themselves. It originates from this act here. It is the same reason why you can never predict where the wind comes from. You can always predict how a bird will fly, how a fish will swim, how a tree will grow. But never, ever, ever the wind, because he's a blind God. And he's a blind hunei riri God. And this is why it's called Nā Mata o Te Ari ki Tāwhiri Mātea. Okay, these are the placing of the major 7, I guess. Some are male, some are female, so you can see the W and you can see the T next to wahine and tāne. Oh, that's probably not square. Oh, kia ora. That's better. And these are the ones that we probably know most of. Matariki, Tipua, Nuku Tipua Rangi, Waiti, Waita, Waipunarangi, and Ururangi. Those were the stars first given by a man by the name of Hāmiora Pio from Ngāti Awa in Whakatāne. And he wrote that in his manuscript and gave that manuscript to Best. And Best recorded them. He also gave 2 additional stars right at the latter part of his manuscript that Best didn't record. These are them. Pohutukawa and Hiwa i te Rangi. These are the stars that are recorded in my koraua's manuscript as being the sacred stars and the additional stars in the Matariki cluster. The eldest is Pohutukawa. is a female. Pohutukawa is the star that carries our dead across the night sky, night after night, year after year. I'll talk about that briefly later. Tipu ānuku. Tupu or tipu means to grow, ānuku in the ground. This star is connected with everything you grow, your kumara, your taro, your potatoes, your bananas. Tipu ārangi, to grow in the sky. This is connected to all the things that grow above your head, like the birds, the berries high in the tree, and the fruits. Don't catch kereru. Waiti. Waiti means fresh water. If I say you have a real waiti, I'm saying that your voice is crystal clear. You have a beautiful singing voice. This is attached to a female voice. Waiti is a female. Waita. Ta is an old word for salt, as in tōta means sweat, which is generally salty, I guess. Okay. Waita is connected to all of the animals in the ocean. Waipunarangi is the water that pools in the sky. This is connected to the weather. This is rain. Ururangi. Ururangi is connected to the wind. Took this photo down in the far south. That's how the people grow too. That's why I think that's why, Kei Pai, I'm from there too. That's why I think the mullet originated down there, because all their hair grows to the back. And finally, Hiwai Te Rangi. This is the only image I could think of showing you Hiwai Te Rangi. It's a star you wish upon. And this might sound like a very Western idea. You ever make a New Year's resolution and break it 2 days later? Going to the gym this year, and then it's Jim Beam. Okay. Hiwai Te Rangi, in the time of our ancestors, when Matariki first rises on the correct night, they would dig a trench in the garden, a trench about this big. And then those people that have wishes in their heart or desires for that year, they would actually stand in the garden in the trench, and soil would be packed around their feet. And the tohunga would karakia. And the most important part of that karakia would be ko tawhi tōru nānana, ko hiwa nui, ko hiwa roa, ko hiwa pūkena, ko hiwa wānanga, ko hiwa I te rangi. Takataka te kāhui o te rangi, ko I āpau tō putanga ki te whai au, ki te ao mārama. So hiwa, great hiwa, wonderful hiwa, hiwa the star. Come down from the stars in the heaven, plant my wishes in the soil and make them grow, make them come true. So that's the star you wish upon if you want to win the lotto numbers. This is just, this is Te Haunui's image of the different stars in Matariki and what they mean. There's a lot of detail in this, so it's pretty poor on the thing, but there's a reason that they're placed where they're placed. Tipu ānuku, or nuku, always goes below rangi. We never go nuku and rangi. Okay, it's always nuku and rangi. There are some places where they are the other way round or all over the place. The reason that they're here is there's balance. Male, female, they're both food. Rangi is above nuku. Over here is food again. Waiti, female, waita, male. Why the waiti above waita? Because fresh water always flows down to salt water. Salt water never flows the other way. It's just quite common sense. Food, balance, male, female. Up the top, waipunarangi and ururangi, rain, wind, male, balance, weather, above everyone else because the wind and the rain comes from above everything else. I don't know why Michael Rowa says Pohutukawa was here and Waiti and Hiwai's there, but what he states is those are the two sacred stars in the cluster. And because one is connected to your dead and one is connected to your wishes or your desires for the year, which are very precious to a person. He koinei I tapu ai. and is the reason that I think Hami or Pio left him out of the list. He whakaaro no e nei. These are just my own wishes. I kind of think Matariki looks a little bit too much like Beyonce in this one. Okay, so when do you look for Matariki? This is one of the big misconceptions. Again, we're misled by Best, who says it should be in the first new moon in June. Unless you move to Istanbul, you will not see Matariki in the sky in the first new moon in June, ever. Okay, it's still below the horizon. The reason that we're really confused is because we think pipiri means June. Kao. June is a numerical Gregorian Western calendar that follows 1 to 30 during the month of June. Pipiri follows the lunar calendar, okay, which goes from new moon to new moon. So you can't make one fit the other. So while we were in June, at the 1st of June, the new moon wasn't until the 6th of June. That's when pipiri started. That wasn't the time to look for Matariki. I attended an event where there was a kuia, and she said, on the 6th of June, she said, oh, here it comes. Here it comes. It's going to come up. This is 5:30. There it is. E tu Matariki ki te tu washita. Just karanga tu Matariki. Beautiful karanga. Finished. She goes, you say something. I said, e te iwi. That is Venus. Matariki is 3 weeks away. Go home, have a sleep. The right time, you know, like a lunar moon is yeah. My wife isn't here, so I'll get away with this. The sun is a male. Okay, he's consistent. Rises, shines, spreads his love, sets. Simple. We're simple beings. Okay? The moon is a female. Okay? She goes up and goes down and goes up and has phases. He pono tēnei. Sometimes those phases change rapidly. But there are good times to do something and bad times to do something. So there are times where you do something, like you good night to fish, bad night to fish. Good night to something, bad night to something. Because you follow the lunar phases. The worst possible time to look for the signs of the year is the new moon. Because the new moon is Whiro, the god of disease, death, illness, plague. Who in their right mind goes out in the time of the god of illness and celebrates the sign of the year? You invite Whiro. The well-known and renowned maramataka expert Weremu Tāwhai says the correct time to look for Matariki is in the lunar phase of Tangaroa, when the phase is at its best. Āpera Hamataunui from the far north in the 1860s said Tangaroa is a phase to look for the moon, to look for Matariki. Tū Takanahau of Tuhoe says the middle of the month during the Tangaroa phase are the nights to look for Matariki. Michael Owa in his manuscript says Tangaroa is a night to look for Matariki. This is Tangaroa. These lunar phases, it's the last quarter. And this is the time to celebrate Matariki, in the last quarter. Now the moon, Matariki this year, rose, so everyone that was out on the 6th of June here, in Whiro, Matariki rose about here. So I'm not too sure what everyone was looking at, and they were awesome kaupapa. I had free meals and drinks at many balls and dances, but it rose here, but you still didn't celebrate because these moons are kore kore, and kore kore are bad. It means kore, nothing, the nothing times. Tangaroa, 1 Tangaroa, 2 Tangaroa, 3 Tangaroa, 4 Tangaroa. And the celebration, the time to look, is the first clear day on these 4 moons. So this year it was the 28th, 29th, 30th of June, the 1st of July, and then it was the second, third, right up to the fourth. Fourth was mutu whenua, or the last night of the first, the last quarter, and then you stop. You do not celebrate in te whiro, because he might turn up. You say, hara mai whiro, you're in trouble. So, Tangaroa, last quarter, there's not only a correct lunar month and a correct lunar phase, there's actually a correct hour to look for matariki. And it's here. This is matariki. There is a karakia about matariki, and one of the sections in the karakia says, e tāne e, karawhiua mai rā te toki a tahua ki rani ki a tā kirikiri mai te tau hou. So Tāne has that big adze, and every morning he smashes it against the dawn, smashes it against the horizon, and the dawn splits open. And he's saying in this karakia, Tāne, crash your adze into the horizon and let the light of the new year shine through. And that's what's happening there. So that's the first flickers of red when matariki is in the correct lunar phase on the correct month, just before the sun comes up. This is when you take your read. So our tipuna did, I am nearly done. Is this making sense? This is lecture number 52 of the matariki season for me. I'm kind of sick of my own voice. There is a massive canoe in the sky. This is a death barge. You know, everyone thinks matariki is a time to celebrate and to come together, and it is. But the first signs of matariki are to our dead. And this is something that's always left out. This is why Pahutuka was in here. This is known in Tainui as Te Waka o Tainui. You regionalise this canoe. This is, to my understanding, what is called Te Waka o Poraurangi. This is what my people know in certain times as Te Waka o Mātātua. Generically, it's known as Te Waka o Rangi, not just because it's my name, but this is the canoe in the sky. Here's the front of the canoe, the bottom, the star here is called Whakapai Waka. There's the back of the canoe, here's the sail, and you're probably wondering what this is. This is a net. This is Te Kūpenga a Taramainuku. Taramainuku is this star here. Now, the star rises, and this cluster rises in June, exactly like that, before the sun comes up. And Taramainuku stands on his boat, on his canoe, and he throws his net across the ground, across the earth. And he trawls. And he trawls his net across the earth, fishing up the souls of the people that had died that year. That night, sorry. So if you die, Taramainuku's net scoops you up, he lifts you up into the sky, and your spirit gets hung off the back of the canoe. Like the feathers, you ever see the feathers off the back of a canoe? That's where they hang. That place on the handle of the pot is called Te Hao o Rua. That's where the spirits get hung. And he does this night after night after night, and as the canoe gets higher and higher every night in the sky, he scoops up our dead. June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, and then in May, in the 11th month, that canoe sets on the west coast with the sun. Matariki goes into the ocean next to the sun, and it takes all our dead to the underworld. And they knew the lunar phase of Tangaroa in that month. They went down or faced the west, and they farewelled our dead. And they went into the underworld for a month. Māori, we carry our dead with us for an entire year. And this is the reason why we don't unveil sometimes for 12 months, or we might not speak again on the marae for 12 months, or we might wear black for 12 months. The 12-month thing is a new thing. It was actually the rising of matariki, when you sever your bonds to your dead. And so when it rises again, here, in the month of June, Taramainuku gets off his canoe, taking the dead. He takes them and he cast them into the sky, and this is a moment where you become a star. This is a moment where our bonds to our dead of the year are severed. And this is where your spirit becomes a star, is where Matariki rises again. The setting of Matariki is known as Mātahi Kari Piwai, and the rising of Matariki is called Mātahi o Te Tau. So there were three things that our tipuna did, and I'm going to end on this. These are the dates for the next 3 years. I've got the next 50 years, but if you want those, you've got to buy my book. $49.95, Wickles. Our tipuna, I just want to go back to this image to end here, did three things. When Matariki rose, and they knew it was going to rise in the morning, they would go out and they would collect food. A kumara for tipu anuku, they'd get maybe an eel for waiti, a snapper for waita, they might get a kereru for tipu arangi, and they would make a umu, or hangi. And they'd put that food in the hangi and they'd cover it and they'd let it cook. And they'd wait for Matariki to rise. And when it rose at that right hour, the tohunga would come out and he'd read the stars. And he'd say, "Ooh, tipu anuku is very bright, so it's going to be a good year to go kumara, but tipu arangi is very hazy, so it's not going to be such a good year for birds. Waipunarangi is really bright, so it's not going to be too bad with rain. In fact, we might get a drought. But ururangi is not very bright, so it's going to be quite windy. And waita is not very good, so it's going to be hard to fish, but that's okay because it's going to be windy. So it's not good to go to the ocean. So there's combinations every year, they're different. So he'd read, number one. Number two, they would conduct what was called a taki mō teatea. So the tohunga would karakia, and the people would call out the names of the dead that they had carried for the year. So all the dead that are upon us, we sever our bonds at that moment. Not sever our bonds, but we lift that tapu of the mate that is on us. This is why we celebrate it. So we call out their names. And the tohunga would karakia ko wai te mate o te tau, and you'd say their name. So-and-so, 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 so-and-so. That's the moment that they go. Finally, once that was done, they would uncover the umu, the hangi. Its name is he umu kohu kohu whetū. And the steam from that oven would rise up and feed Matariki and replenish him because he's carried our dead for a year. And the food in that hangi is called a hautapu. That's the name of that food. It's a sacred food to feed gods. And here, in Te Tai Rāwhiti, you always haka about that. When you say, ko te hautapu e rite ki te kai nā matariki. The sacred foods that have been prepared in order to feed and appease Matariki. Tapare reia ko ia tapa. Severing the bonds that you have to your dead. And then Tara Mainuku stands on the canoe, taking our dead. Kia tū te wana wana, ki runga I te rangi e tū I hon, and cast them into the heavens. So I just probably want to end there. I want to say thank you to my colleague over here, Erica, who's taken these images right across the motu. So this is the place where the mullet comes from in Bluff, where we saw the southern lights. Matariki over Aoraki. This one here is from Kāpū Te Rangi on this side, with Matariki setting just as the sun is set. And this is the best marae in the world. It's my marae. So e karema ko te tūmanako ia, he pai e nei pito pito kōrero kia koutou. Sorry, I think my skirt went a little bit longer than I had planned. I want to say thank you all very much for coming along. Derek, It's an honour and a privilege to come and talk to everyone here. Nōku te honore e karema, nōku te whiwhi. Ko taku mihi whakamutuna ki a koutou nā tauira. My final words are to you, the students of this institution. There is a saying, ko te mātauranga, no te kau o rehua he wai no rua whetū. So our knowledge comes from the top knot of rehua and it flows down to us from the stars like a waterfall. And so te kau is the top part of your top knot and also can be translated, te rua whetū means your fontanelle, I suppose, or the place where a heke meets a pou in a wharenui. And it's at a place like this that knowledge flows directly into you, right from the stars into you, and manifests itself by what you do on the walls. So, kia koutou, he toi whakairo he mana tanata, ko koutou e whakatina nana i enei kupu, i tēnei pō, tēnā koutou, te tai rāwhiti, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa.